In the heart of Orion Station, the Iron Fang Cantina thrived as a gathering pit for the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Its reputation had been forged in blood and broken deals, where smugglers toasted beside mercenaries, assassins laughed with pirates, and diplomats who had long abandoned their ideals drank away what was left of their conscience. The air was a haze of chemical vapors designed to keep dozens of species breathing, though it poisoned them slowly all the same. Sickly green light pulsed from bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls, bathing every patron in a glow that made the dangerous look monstrous and the pathetic appear tragic. Tentacled Valeri brushed shoulders with insectoid Shrix traders, while translucent Phorians hovered in containment suits near the ceiling. The noise sat somewhere between a riot and a funeral. Loud, messy, but always a heartbeat away from violence. Behind the bar, the owner, Zarin, polished glasses with 3 of his 7 limbs while keeping the others close to a rack of stun rifles. Business was booming, which meant bloodshed was inevitable. At the center of it all loomed Drakkar Bloodfang, a towering Vorthan mercenary nearly 3 meters tall, his crimson-scaled frame coiled with muscle. His eyes glowed like molten amber, radiating the ruthless cunning that had made his species the most feared hunters in the known systems. Tonight, he commanded the room, boasting of his exploits while clutching a goblet that looked laughably small in his clawed hand. His latest story painted him as a predator who had stalked a human across the Vega colonies. The ghost of Epsilon Reach, he sneered, mocking her legend. He described her desperation, her tears, her begging. His thunderous laugh rattled the tables, and his audience gave the expected mix of reactions. Mandibles clicking in applause, tendrils writhing in disgust, and some simply staring as though he were a grotesque sideshow. But near the bar's edge, a new figure slipped quietly inside. She was unremarkable at first glance. Slender, brown hair tied back in a simple knot, dressed in civilian clothes, so ordinary they might have been bought on any backwater station. Yet the way she moved carried the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime teaching herself how not to be noticed. Her pale green eyes scanned the room with surgical precision before she claimed a stool at the far end. "Terran whiskey," she said softly to Zarin. "Whatever you've got that isn't poison." The bartender studied her with wary amusement. "Either you're very brave or very stupid, ordering that in here," he bubbled. "Probably both," she answered dryly, taking the glass with a nod. Drakkar's keen hearing caught her voice, and his predatory gaze locked on her instantly. Here, in his domain, was a perfect prize, a living Terran, a so-called Deathworlder, delivered like prey to a hunter. He stood, his booming voice silencing half the room. "Well, well, a human walks willingly into the jaws of a legend. Tell me, little Terran, have you heard the tales of Drakkar Bloodfang? Do your kind whisper my name around campfires?" His grin revealed teeth like daggers. The woman turned slightly, meeting his blazing eyes with the calm detachment of someone watching a street performer. She sipped her whiskey, grimaced at the taste, and shrugged. "Can't say I have." The dismissal hit Drakkar like a blade. His scales darkened, and the cantina's noise drained as tension coiled in the air. He began to recount, louder now, the details of his hunts. Terran soldiers broken under his claws, colonies burned to ash, pirates dragged screaming from their ships. His words dripped with violence, his audience watching with a mix of unease and fascination. But the human woman showed no reaction, sipping her drink as if he were narrating the weather. When he reached the climax of his story, a massacre on a mining colony, the woman set her glass down with a soft clink that seemed to echo across the silent cantina. For the first time, she turned fully to face him. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "That's quite a collection of stories. But I'm curious, did any of them walk away?" The question cut through the air like a blade. The cantina fell into absolute silence, every patron frozen. Even the hum of the life support system seemed to pause as if the station itself held its breath. And then, Drakkar's grin faltered, because somewhere, buried beneath her calm tone, he recognized a voice he had sworn was silenced forever. The ghost of Epsilon Reach hadn't died at all. She had been sitting there the entire time, listening, waiting, and unlike the others he had hunted, she wasn't the prey tonight. Zarin's limbs froze mid-polish on the glass he had been cleaning. Across the room, Captain Harlan Murphy lifted his head from his drink with the look of a man who had just heard the first tremor of an avalanche. His cybernetically enhanced Altarian companion, Rax, adjusted his implants with a faint mechanical whir, focusing on the confrontation like a sniper sighting a target. Drakkar Bloodfang's molten eyes narrowed into slits, the playful arrogance in his voice evaporating as though vented into hard vacuum. "What did you say?" he rumbled. The human woman, Elira Kane, though she had not offered her name, tilted her head and repeated, her tone perfectly calm. "I asked if any of them walked away. Your hunts, I mean. Because it seems like every story ends the same way. I was curious about your success rate with real competition." A ripple of unease passed through the cantina. Drakkar's scales flushed to a deeper crimson, the shade that in his species meant aggression, though some whispered it also betrayed fear. His vast frame shifted, muscles bunching under his hide like cables under strain. "My record is perfect," he growled, his voice dropping into the subsonic register his kind used to terrify prey. "I have never lost a quarry. My trophies fill vaults across the outer rim. The claws of the Butcher of Kepler, the hands of the saboteur who burned the Centauri convoy, the skull of a human who thought the asteroids of Vega could hide him." Every word dripped with the pride of a predator who believed his own legend. He prowled in a slow circle, building his rhythm again, declaring that he hunted the deadliest prey in existence. Deathworlders from Sol, the Terrans, creatures born of a planet so hostile it tried to kill its children every day. The crowd leaned in, spellbound. Insectoid shrieks clicked their mandibles with excitement. The Volari slithered closer, and even the Forians drifted down from the ceiling, their gaseous bodies swirling with anticipation. At a side table, Murphy noticed Rax's cybernetic hand twitching toward a concealed weapon. He placed his palm over it and muttered, Not yet. Let's see where this goes." Nearby, a Shrix merchant began running a betting pool, with odds stacked heavily in Drakkar's favor, proof, perhaps, of the average patron's poor sense of judgment. Elira only nodded as though Drakkar had shared an amusing anecdote. "Impressive," she said, and somehow managed to make it sound like an insult. "But I notice your hunts usually involve isolated individuals, loners, people cut off from help. Am I right?" Drakkar's stride faltered, only for a heartbeat. "I hunt where prey can be found," he snapped. "Of course," Elira agreed smoothly, sipping her whiskey as though they were chatting about farming techniques. "But I wonder, do you prefer to catch them while they're resting, or do you like the challenge of meeting them when they're fully aware and ready?" "I adapt to the situation," Drakkar replied, but the defensive note creeping into his voice betrayed him. "Adaptability is vital," Elira said brightly, as if she were commending a student. "But I have to ask, your prey, were they usually armed? Beyond basic survival tools, I mean." She pressed on, her questions flowing with disarming casualness. Had he ever faced trained soldiers? What about organized resistance? Had he hunted groups rather than single targets? With each query, the weight of his legends crumbled, his grand victories reframed as opportunism. Drakkar finally snapped, his voice carrying less menace now than frustration. "What are you implying, human?" Elira looked genuinely surprised, her tone innocent. "Implying? Nothing at all. I'm just fascinated by your methods. Hunting Deathworlders is serious work. The mortality rate must be enormous, especially against professionals. I think everyone here would love to know how you've kept such a flawless record. How do you survive every single hunt?" The crowd murmured, the tension thick enough to taste. Some leaned in eagerly, others smirked, enjoying the rare spectacle of the galaxy's most arrogant hunter being cornered. Drakkar's forked tongue flicked nervously, tasting the air for danger he could not identify. Something was wrong. The human female should have been trembling by now, broken by the aura of a predator. Instead, she sat cool and unshaken, dissecting him like a scholar reviewing a specimen. His scales shifted again, the mottled pattern of doubt. "You ask too many questions for prey," he hissed. But instead of a predator's growl, the words came out brittle, petulant, like a child whose bluff had been called. "I ask questions because I'm curious," Elira replied, her voice steady, maddeningly calm. "Hunting Deathworlders is high-risk work. Statistically, most humans aren't killers at all. But soldiers? They don't run, Drakkar. They fight. And when they're cornered..." She set her glass down, leaning forward just enough for her pale green eyes to catch the sickly glow of the fungi overhead, gleaming like a predator's in the dark. They don't beg. The cantina was silent now, the entire audience realizing what Drakkar hadn't yet admitted to himself. This wasn't prey testing its luck. This was the ghost herself, dismantling her hunter in front of an audience that had just shifted their bets without even realizing it. The words slipped from Selene's lips with the same tone one might use to discuss fumigation, but the weight of them lingered in the air like poison gas. Around the cantina, patrons exchanged uneasy glances, and even the bookie running bets began to sweat, suddenly unsure of the odds he'd set. "What are you implying?" Krell demanded, though the crack in his voice betrayed more fear than fury. Selene tilted her head slightly, considering him as if he were a puzzle to be solved. "If I were in your profession," she said softly, "I'd go for the weak. Refugees, most likely. Starved families, traders worn thin from too many jumps in zero gravity, people who wouldn't know the front of a rifle from the back, colonists who signed up to grow wheat, not wage war." Every word landed like a hammer blow, and the audience shifted uneasily. The hunter was no longer the massive reptilian brute, but the small human woman, calmly peeling his legend apart, exposing it as fraud. "It makes sense," she continued, her voice still casual, almost bored. "Maximum profit, minimum risk. Why fight a soldier when you can get the same pay for dragging in someone's grandmother?" Krell's colossal frame trembled, his predator's mask crumbling to pieces. "You don't know what you're talking about," he tried, but the edge in Selene's voice turned cold. "Don't I?" she asked, finally letting her words cut. She set down her glass and faced him fully, her pale green eyes glowing in the fungi light with something far less human than the crowd expected. "Here's how it usually goes. You get a contract on a human, you research, find someone isolated, exhausted, maybe wounded. You track them until they make a mistake, until they rest. And when they do, you pounce." The cantina had gone deathly silent, the only sound Krell's ragged breathing. Selene pressed on, dissecting him like a specimen pinned under glass. "And when they beg, because of course they beg, they're refugees, not soldiers, you kill them. And then you convince yourself it makes you some kind of apex predator. That hunting desperate souls makes you the equal of warriors who actually fight back." The words exploded like a shockwave through the room. No one flinched at her insults, but at the truth behind them. She wasn't tearing down just Krell. She was burning his entire reputation to ash. From the back, Captain Joran let out a low whistle. "Damn," he muttered to his cybernetic partner. "She's not debating him. She's conducting the autopsy." The cantina owner froze mid-motion, realizing this wasn't violence. This was worse. This was destruction of identity. Krell tried to rally, his voice booming, but it cracked like rotten wood. "You don't know who you're dealing with, human. I am Krell Bloodclaw. I've killed more of your kind than you could count." Selene swirled her drink, unbothered. "I'm sure you have. The real question isn't how many you killed, but what kind of people they were when you did. See, there's a difference between a hunter and an executioner. A hunter faces prey that can fight back. An executioner kills the helpless." The silence that followed was suffocating. "So which are you, Krell?" she asked at last, and the words hung over him like a death sentence. His body sagged, the confidence of decades collapsing in a heap of broken pride. He tried to speak, but could only choke. Selene raised her glass again, her voice gentle now, dismissive. "It's all right. We both know the answer." She glanced at the crowd as she delivered the killing stroke. "There's no shame in being an executioner. The galaxy needs its cleaners, after all. But let's call things what they are." Her casual dismissal was more devastating than any insult. His life's work, his identity, reduced to janitorial slaughter. Then she leaned forward, her voice carrying just enough steel to shatter what little remained of his legend. "You want to know who I am? I'm Selene Kane, formerly Gunnery Sergeant Kane, Colonial Marine Corps, 3rd Expeditionary Force." The effect was instant. Glasses shattered on tables. Jaws dropped. And in that moment, every soul in the cantina realized the hunter had just been unmasked. Not by violence, but by the truth. Altarian's cybernetic eyes flickered in alarm, struggling to process what they were hearing. Even the ghost-like ethereals in their shimmering suits rippled with unease. Selene didn't falter. She listed her history as if she were reciting a grocery list: 12 years of active duty, 2 tours in the Frontier Wars, classified operations on the far edge of the spiral, 3 years teaching survival tactics to recruits on Titan. She swirled her whiskey, pausing only to glance at it with idle interest. Current occupation? She said with the calm of someone reading a resume. Private security consultant. Hostile environments, close protection for high-risk clients. The cantina had gone so silent that the hush carried the weight of a prayer. For the first time, many in that room realized they were in the presence of something genuinely dangerous. Selene's tone softened into that of an instructor, but the words were edged with steel. Thing about hunting real Deathworlders is, we hunt back. And it's never a sport when both sides are playing. Her eyes locked onto Krell, whose massive frame had frozen like prey caught in a predator's gaze. A real engagement, she continued, doesn't mean cornering someone in a cave and listening to them beg. It means 3 days of me tracking you through terrain that wants to kill us both. It means weapons you've never seen, tactics your kind hasn't even imagined. The calm delivery painted a picture that made several patrons' hands tremble around their drinks. It means you're up against someone who can make weapons out of anything: a glass, a panel, even a power conduit. I'm sitting here looking at 43 things I could turn lethal before you finish blinking. I could poison the air with environmental controls, collapse gravity into a black hole, or cut you open with this glass. She lifted her drink casually, then set it down. No threats, no theatrics, just a professional explaining tools of her trade. And that's the fun part, she added, her voice almost playful. Because we don't hunt alone. Even if you take one of us down, our squad is already flanking you before you draw your next breath. Krell's attempt at words came out as a broken rasp. Selene leaned forward, her expression shifting at last into something colder. That's the difference between chasing refugees and fighting soldiers. Refugees want to survive. Soldiers want to make sure predators like you never hurt anyone else again. And that tends to make us very focused. In that moment, the unremarkable woman vanished. In her place stood something lethal, undeniable, the kind of quiet death that true warriors recognized instantly. She drained her whiskey, set the glass down with a soft click, and whispered, "When you ask me if any of my targets ever walked away, what you're really asking is if you've ever fought anyone dangerous. And we both know the answer." Krell's legendary poise shattered, his scales paling into the gray of terror. His hands shook. His reputation, the galaxy's great predator, crumbled in front of the entire room. Selene reached into her jacket and the cantina froze, but she only produced a credit chip. Sliding it across the bar, she told the barkeep, "Keep the change." She stood, adjusted her coat, and as she passed Krell's table, she delivered the final cut. "You know the difference between hunter and prey? Prey runs. Hunters don't have to." She walked toward the exit without a sound. At the door she turned, her voice carrying over the silent crowd. "You might want to consider a new career, Krell. The galaxy's getting smaller, word travels fast, and sooner or later, you'll meet someone who hunts back." The doors hissed shut behind her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the cantina breathed again, hushed voices whispering what they had just witnessed. The bookie quietly refunded bets. The mercenary in the corner swore he'd never take another job against a colonial veteran. And Krell? He sat alone, staring at his hands, his legend reduced to ash. He had gotten his answer at last. No, none of his prey had ever walked away, because he had never faced a true hunter until tonight.